On 28th of February 2026, Operation Epic Fury began without spectacle. There were no immediate explosions, no dramatic visuals of missiles cutting across the night sky, and no early signs of kinetic confrontations. Instead, the first phase unfolded quietly within the electromagnetic spectrum where modern warfare is actually decided. Iranian radar operations began reporting inconsistencies, tracking instability, signal clutter, and delayed identification cycles. Systems were still powered, still scanning, but no longer reliable. What they were experiencing was not failure, it was interference. At the center of this opening move were US Navy electronic attack packages led by the EA-18, or a derivative of the F-18 Growler, a dedicated electronic warfare aircraft designed to jam radar and communications across multiple frequency bands. Operating alongside stealth support assets, these aircraft did not aim to destroy tanks or defenses. They aimed to disconnect them by simultaneously targeting surveillance radars, fire control frequencies, and communication links. They fragmented what was supposed to be an integrated air defense network. Within minutes, Iran's layered system began behaving like isolated nodes, each one functioning individually but no longer sharing a coherent picture. Once that electromagnetic dislocation was achieved, the kinetic phase followed with precision. Targets were struck not because defenses were weak, but because they no longer coordinated. Modern strike packages do not require dominance. They required just enough disruption to delay reaction times, and that delay had already been engineered in the spectrum. Some would say that victory by the United States forces had been achieved. However, Iran's response revealed the evolving nature of this domain. Within days, Tehran combined electromagnetic disruption with selective kinetic retaliation. Iranian forces launched precision strikes on forward-positioned radar installations supporting US operations in the region, targeting surveillance nodes that contribute to the battlespace awareness. Even limited damage to these systems introduced gaps in coverage, forcing adjustments in monitoring and reducing overall confidence in the operational picture. Simultaneously, large-scale GPS spoofing operations in the Strait of Hormuz created a second layer of disruption. Commercial vessels and military platforms began reporting positional inconsistencies. Navigation systems displaying false coordinates, quite similar to your Google Maps taking you to a wrong location even though you fed another address. It takes you to Islamabad instead of Lahore. Very dislocating. Movement slowed, verification processes increased, and one of the most critical maritime checkpoints became an environment of controlled uncertainty. What emerged from the opening phase of this conflict was not chaos, but clarity. The US established early spectrum dominance to shape the battle space, while Iran demonstrated that this dominance can be contested through a combination of disruption and targeted strikes on critical nodes. The battle was not decided when missiles hit their targets. It was decided earlier, when systems lost coherence. The first strike in this war was not explosive. It was electromagnetic. Now, what is this electromagnetic spectrum that we just spoke of? What is spoofing? What is jamming? How do you jam a communication link? How do you jam that you cannot see? Let's talk about it today and take a deep dive on how electromagnetic spectrum or electronic warfare is changing today's battlefield. My name is Qasim. Welcome to Radar Mode on Pakistan Connect. Today's episode focuses on the war domain that modern militaries critically depend on, but it's woven in so much secrecy, it's rarely explained. The electromagnetic spectrum. What is this electromagnetic spectrum or EMS that we keep talking about? The electromagnetic spectrum is the collection of waves and frequencies that exist in our universe. A very small portion of this electromagnetic spectrum is visible light. Apart from this small part which we can see, there is a whole range of waves that we cannot see. This includes cosmic waves, this includes infrared waves, this includes ultraviolet waves or light, this includes satellite waves, radar waves, all these waves which are just not visible to the eye, yet they're used to communicate, to jam, to share locations, to share information. The electromagnetic spectrum, or EMS, is critical to today's battlefield. Whoever controls the EMS will control the flow of information and battlefield awareness of that battle space. You would understand that how critical is to know where your enemy is positioned, where it's firing from, what it's firing from, and how to track whatever is being fired. The EMS in today's world is where radars detect communications flow and weapons receive guidance. Control of this domain does not just mean that you're improving your own effectiveness, you are actively degrading your opponent's ability to function. The events of Operation Epic Fury reinforce a critical shift in warfare. Battles are no longer opened by firepower. They're opened by disruption of information and signals. Before any physical strike takes place, networks are fractured, sensors are blinded, and decision-making slows down. What appears as a clean and efficient operation is often the result of a battlefield that has already been shaped invisibly. In today's episode, we will break down how jamming works, how electronic warfare evolved, and how major powers are using it today, and why it has become the ultimate equalizer in modern conflict. Most importantly, we will examine how Pakistan has adapted to this reality and is building capabilities that align with the demands of 21st century warfare. To understand jamming, we have to first understand how we communicate across a battle space. As radio transmission became a worldwide accepted technology, we started using radios or radio waves for communications. Basic communications started off by working on radio waves. Radio waves could travel long distances, they could carry voice, audio, and communication signals across the battle space. If you've ever listened to a radio station, you would know that you have to tune to a specific frequency in order to listen to that radio station. And once we have tuned to that radio frequency, any communication which is being broadcast on that particular frequency, you will be able to listen. And anyone who's listening to that particular frequency can listen to the same broadcast. What if I don't want everyone to be listening in on my frequency? The secret was the frequency itself. A list of frequencies would there be very secretly shared across multiple units so that only they have access to exactly where the signal is being transmitted to and transmitted from. But what if I could find out which frequency my enemy is using? Then I can do two things. Firstly, I can listen in to whatever instructions are being passed down in that battle space from the enemy between the units. The second thing I can do is carry out a misinformation campaign, which means, and which was demonstrated by in the Second World War when the British were fighting the Germans, a lot of false information was being transmitted along both sides to give wrong directions or wrong instructions to any participating military unit. Could be aircraft, could be ground units, could be naval units. What if you cannot trust the information that is coming to you? Now this is when I know the frequency which my enemy is using. What if I don't know the frequency that my enemy is using? Just don't have a clue. How do you jam what you cannot see and what you cannot know? So imagine if you're driving in your car and you have your radio on, and you know that most of the channels are between the band of say 89 all the way to about 101 kilohertz or megahertz. What if I start transmitting one song on all these frequencies? Or what if I start transmitting a beep? If you've ever seen a walkie-talkie being used, it can either be transmitting or receiving. When you press the button to talk, you can only use it on a one-way communication. It's called a half duplex communication. If you can talk and speak at the same time, it's a full duplex communication. What if the frequency that I'm supposed to use in my battlefield, there is a particular signal or a beep or white noise being transmitted across all that frequency range, which means I'm essentially blocking my distributed units to communicate within each other, which would create a lot of confusion in the battle space. Every piece of communication across this electronic magnetic spectrum is multiplexed into smaller and smaller and smaller frequencies. But if I want to jam this entire band, I will just start transmitting one signal across all these frequencies. If I'm transmitting that one signal across all these frequencies, I'm making this frequency range or this band of frequencies unavailable for communications for myself and for my enemy, thus making the battle space very, very confused. This is the basis of how jamming works. Jamming or spoofing is about understanding which frequencies or which platforms or which communication platform is your enemy using, and then either spoofing it, giving it wrong information, or just making that platform unavailable for use. A small example is how Wing Commander Abhinandan, his signal was jammed when communicating with his headquarters, thus he did not receive the information to circle around and move back to base. He was fed wrong information through electronic jamming and he was unable to complete his mission, resulting in a crash and then capture by Pakistan Armed Forces. I'll give you some ideas to how this electronic spectrum is used. In the space of the EMS, modern warfare functions as a network rather than a collection of independent systems. Systems integration means sensors detect, communication links transmit, and weapons engage, all within a continuous loop of information exchange. This entire loop depends entirely on how stable your electromagnetic signals are. When those signals are disrupted, as we discussed just now, the loop breaks down, and with it, the effectiveness of the entire force goes nose-diving. Jamming targets this dependency directly. By introducing noise or deceptive signals into specific frequency bands, it prevents radars from forming accurate tracks, disrupts communication between units, and interferes with navigation systems. The result is not immediate destruction but gradual degradation of fighting capability. Systems remain operational in isolation, but they lose the ability to function as coordinated whole. This is why jamming is increasingly treated as a prerequisite for modern operations. Aircraft such as the derivative of the F-15, the EA-18G Growler, an airborne electronic attack platform capable of wide spectrum jamming, are deployed ahead or alongside strike assets or strike aircraft to shape the battle space. Their role is specifically to reduce the effectiveness of enemy defenses before any physical engagement occurs. This is also a part of SEAD operations, which are suppression of enemy air defenses, in which specific attacks are targeted for radars, SAM batteries, and any anti-air defenses. The defensive aspect forms the other half of this equation. Electronic countermeasures like radar jamming or spoofing can disrupt incoming missile guidance, degrade target radars, and protect high-value assets without requiring direct interception. This reduces risk while maintaining operational capability. The significance of this particular domain extends way beyond the military. Civilian aviation relies on stable navigation signals. Maritime traffic or naval traffic depends on GPS accuracy, and critical infrastructure is tied to uninterrupted communication networks. When jamming operations occur at scale, they affect not only the military forces but also commercial and logistic systems. This overlap makes EMS control a strategic tool with wide-reaching consequences. The concept of electronic warfare, one of the war domains in 21st century warfare, began as an experiment in disrupting communications and gradually evolved into a core military capability. During the Russian-Japanese War of 1904-05, Russian forces had attempted to interfere with Japanese radio transmissions used for naval coordination. Although limited in effectiveness, this marked the first recognition that communication itself could be targeted. In the First World War, interception and basic interference became more structured, but it was in the Second World War that electronic warfare matured significantly. The German forces used radio navigation systems such as the Nichenbein to guide bombers with surprising accuracy. The British response involved jamming and spoofing these signals, causing aircraft to deviate from their intended targets and releasing their payloads elsewhere. This demonstrated that controlling signals could directly influence combat outcomes. The introduction of chaff further expanded this concept. Now, what is chaff? Chaff is one of the countermeasures that are installed on modern fighter aircraft to reduce their radar signature and to evade incoming surface-to-air missiles or air-to-air missiles. What chaff essentially does is launches a burst of small fragments of metal. Now, these small pieces of metal confuse the radar, which is guiding itself along with the radar signature of the aircraft, and might get attracted to these sharp small tiny fragments of metal instead of the aircraft itself. Chaff has been reasonably successful, although incoming missiles have had their own trajectory of improvement. So the roles of chaff or flares has marginally decreased as beyond range visual battles have taken space in the modern battlefield. By dispersing these small metallic strips in the air, aircraft created false radar returns that overwhelmed the enemy systems. Radar operators were forced to interpret a flood of ambiguous data, reducing their ability to track real targets effectively. During the Cold War, electronic warfare became institutionalized. The Soviet Union conducted large-scale jamming of Western broadcasts, while NATO developed advanced countermeasures to protect its own systems. This period also saw the expansion of electronic warfare into information control, where the objective extended beyond military operations. The Vietnam War introduced offensive electronic warfare through specialized units. The F-105 Wild Weasel, a modified strike aircraft designed to locate and suppress enemy radar systems, and later platforms like the F-4G, fourth-generation suppression aircraft equipped with anti-radiation capabilities, combined jamming with targeted strikes. Now, when we say anti-radiation, this has nothing to do with nuclear assets. Anti-radiation means a missile that can track radiation signals, which essentially means radars. Anti-radiation missiles are essentially anti-radar missiles. These capabilities force enemy air defenses into difficult choices, either remaining active and risking destruction, or shutting down and losing situational awareness. In 1991, in the Gulf War, electronic warfare had become central to operational planning. Coalition forces used extensive jamming and suppression techniques to degrade Iraqi air defenses. Despite having a large and layered system, Iraq struggled to coordinate its response effectively, illustrating that coherence is as important as capability. Today, electronic warfare is fully integrated into military doctrine. The US continues to lead in airborne electronic attack, though platforms like the EA-18G Growler, a carrier-based jammer with multi-band disruption capabilities supported by programs such as the Next Generation Jammer, which expands its reach and precision access across the spectrum. Russia emphasizes powerful ground-based systems, such as the Krashuka-4, a mobile electronic warfare system designed to jam airborne radars and satellite links, enabling area denial over large regions. In conflicts like Ukraine, these systems have been used extensively to disrupt GPS signals and interfere with drone operations, creating a contested electromagnetic environment. China has adopted a network-centric approach, integrating electronic warfare into broader informationalized operations. Platforms like the J-16D, a Chinese electronic warfare variant of a strike fighter equipped with jamming pods and sensor suppression systems, reflect this integration by combining kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities within a single framework. Of course, we understand that when we say kinetic, we talk about an asset being released from an aircraft and physically attacking or hitting another asset. When we say non-kinetic, we're talking about uses of electromagnetic spectrum as a fighting capability. Recent conflicts highlight how electronic warfare shapes outcomes without always being visible. Disruption of GPS affects navigation, communication interference isolates military units, and radar jamming reduces detection capability. These effects accumulate, influencing decision-making and operational effectiveness over time. Electronic warfare has fundamentally altered the balance between stronger and weaker forces. Traditionally, military advantage is based on numbers, firepower, and the advancement of their technology platforms. Electronic warfare targets the dependencies of those advantages rather than confronting them directly. By disrupting communication networks, spoofing sensor inputs, and degrading navigation systems, a smaller force can impose significant operational costs on a more advanced opponent. This approach does not require parity or equality of hardware. It requires an understanding of vulnerabilities within the system. The more advanced a force becomes, the more it relies on stable signals and integrated networks. Let's get to the interesting bits. Pakistan's evolution in electronic warfare reflects a deliberate shift from reactive capability to integrated doctrine. During the Balakot crisis in February 2019, the importance of situational awareness and coordination became evident. When public attention focused on aerial engagements, the underlying requirement was clear. Effective response depends on reliable connection and communication. In recent years, Pakistan has expanded its focus on electronic warfare, integrating it more deeply into operational planning. By the time the India-Pakistan conflict happened in May 2025, there was a noticeable shift in approach. Electronic support measures, airborne early warning and communication control played a role in shaping this engagement. A central element of this particular capability is airborne early warning and control, the SAP ARI, a Swedish AEW&C system mounted on the SAP 2000 with long-range AESA radars and electromagnetic support measures, provides extended detection coverage and real-time situational awareness. This allowed for early identification of threats and coordinated responses across multiple domains. The recent introduction of KJ-500, a Chinese Y9-based AEW&C aircraft with 350 degrees AESA radar coverage and extended endurance, represents a significant enhancement. Unlike earlier systems, it offers a full circular surveillance and deeper integration into network-centric operations, improving coordination between airborne and ground units. Pakistan has also moved towards standoff electronic attack aircrafts. The Hava standoff jammer, a Turkish-developed electronic warfare platform based on a business jet with long-range jamming systems, is designed to disrupt enemy radars and communications from extended distances. If we could show you this aircraft, it looks really weird because it has so much jamming and electronic warfare systems integrated into its fuselage. This allows operations to be conducted while exposing high-value assets to direct threats. These developments are supported by ground-based electronic warfare systems and improved network integration, creating a layered approach to spectrum management. More importantly, they reflect a doctrinal shift. Electronic warfare is no longer treated as an auxiliary function, it is integrated into planning and execution as a core component of all modern operations. This shift demonstrates an understanding that future conflicts will be decided not by physical engagements, but by the ability to control information, perception, and coordination within the electromagnetic domain. The trajectory of modern warfare points towards a clear conclusion. Control of the electromagnetic spectrum is becoming as important as control of land, air, or sea. The domain determines how effectively forces can communicate, detect, and engage, making it central to all aspects of military operations. As reliance on advanced systems increase, so does vulnerability to disruption. This creates an environment where electronic warfare can shape outcomes without direct confrontation. Success is no longer defined solely by destruction, but by the ability to maintain coherence while degrading that of the opponent. Pakistan's ongoing smart investment in electronic warfare reflects an awareness of this shift. By focusing on spectrum control, network integration, and situational awareness, it is positioning itself to operate within the realities of modern conflict. The most decisive battles of the future may not be visible. They will unfold in signals, in interference patterns, and in moments where clarity is lost on one side and maintained on the other. In that space, the advantage is not loud, but it is absolute. This is all from Radar Mode on Pakistan Connect. If you liked this episode and found it valuable, share and subscribe to Pakistan Connect and drop your thoughts in the comments. This is Qasim signing off. Remember, the most powerful weapon in modern warfare is the one you cannot see. So be vigilant, be aware, and I'll see you next week.